Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at our studios at the Air Force Association's Washington headquarters to talk to Remy Nathan, the Vice President for International Affairs at the Aerospace Industries Association of America. Remy, great seeing you. We were on a panel discussion at the ComDef conference, which is always an annual highlight, and we agreed that we would follow up and talk a little bit about the conventional arms transfer policy, but also the administration's ruminations on the export of unmanned aerial systems or remotely piloted aircraft. I know that our allies, it's been a source of frustration that whether, some of America's closest allies, whether it was the UK or France, the Danes, the Dutch or the Germans, had challenges getting access to these systems. Some, the Saudi Arabians, went to China to satisfy that RPA itch. Talk to us a little bit on both of these fronts, where we are on the conventional arms transfer policy and sort of what are the next gates and wickets as the administration goes forward with that, something very necessary, something you've committed a decade of your life to sort of driving this enterprise-wide approach. And then let's talk a little bit about the UAS policy as well.
Okay. Well, Vago, I would say that the ComDef conference was quite informative for me because I heard for the first time a recognition by a number of U.S. government officials and military officials about the fact that the conventional arms transfer system can do better, should do better. That's the commitment, I think, that is coming from the revisions to the conventional arms transfer policy and the implementation plan that the administration has committed to. We've moved away from this notion that the system is burdened, not broken, to let's move forward and let's find the next way of enhancing our ability to cooperate with our allies and partners. So what are the next steps? The next steps are going to be developing specific implementation targets. I believe we've heard that they've got something in the neighborhood of 27 or so, and various specialty groups comprised of interagency officials who are going to be dedicated to seeing the progress go forward to completion on those targets. Industry is very keen on being a part of that process, and we have received a commitment from the administration to work with us to make sure that we can provide input on the targets that they have in mind, the milestones for success, and as well at least have a forum to be able to say that if there are other issues or objectives that they need to take into consideration that they may not have thought of, that they might want to consider making that part of the plan.
And let's talk a little bit about the UAS plan as well. One of the big concerns has been the sensitivity of the data feeds, how allies access those data feeds, and also concerns that there are MTCR, right, MCTR, missile control technology regime questions that go with it. I understand the long argument that you can, turn your Cessna into a weapon as well, but there are those range and payload considerations that the United States has always applied for the export of those systems. Talk to us a little bit about how this minefield is going to get negotiated by the administration.
So it's tricky because you have parallel tracks that you have to account for. Certainly you've got discussions that are taking place within the MTCR with the various signatories, and there will be sessions later on this year where I believe that there will be conversations about how to get nuance into the system, to be able to say that just because something travels at a certain range with a certain payload does not necessarily make it a missile. By the same token, even as the administration released its commentary on commitment to an implementation plan for reforms on conventional arms transfers, they specifically said that they were already starting revisions to the UAS export policy. Those revisions ultimately are going to be tracking those separate multilateral negotiations, so they're kind of intertwined. What we're looking for in industry, I think, is greater clarity on where we stand right now and more progress in seeing the revisions that have already been announced implemented, such that we see, for instance, that there are equal paths to foreign military sales tracks for UAS sales, as well as direct commercial sales options, which many of our allies and partners have been seeking for some time.
Do you think, and of course, thank you very much for correcting me because I said MTCR and then I said MCTR, and it is MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime. all eyes are on, there's one thing to have a willingness to export, and you and I have talked about this. Obviously, the administration has a desire to want to export, but then there's the rhetoric that does emanate from the White House. And the more I talk to some of our allies and partners, the more concern there is about pressing ahead with U.S. systems. There are some in the U.S. system whose view is unequivocally, we have the technology, they can't go to anybody else, so they will end up buying for us. So the sooner we just get over the slow dancing and the hurt feelings, let's just get down to business, just buy our stuff. I've talked to friends of mine, one of them in Europe last weekend in Brussels, who said, look, I mean, the reality is this is the wake-up call all of us really needed. And we are already moving, it's a mutual friend of ours actually who's been in this business for 30 years and said, we've made more progress in the last couple of months than we did over the last 30 years of sort of European governments coming together and saying, hey, you know what, we really do need to reduce our dependency on the United States. And this rhetoric sort of confirms that. And we've seen enormous progress, right? I mean, the French and the Germans got together to develop an aircraft program. There are armored vehicles on all of these fronts where things had been stalled for a while are starting to move. From the standpoint of the organization that represents the industry, I know publicly everybody's been very bullish. Privately, there have been concerns. What are some things that the entire system can do to sort of reassure our allies that, hey, look, this transatlantic link remains or transglobal links remain very, very important? Or is there a concern that at some point this does have a negative effect on America's ability to export, which is so critical to interoperability, but as well as the bottom line of the companies?
So I think the key is recognizing that as this administration is trying to pursue new ways forward on a range of aspects of bilateral and multilateral relationships, whether you're talking about political, economic, trade, security, and the like, I think there is a recognition within the administration that it is a competitive environment. It's a competition for influence. It's a competition for market access. So even as we strive to advance U.S. interests, take that to the next level, we have to figure out ways of being the better partner, the more reliable partner. And in that vein, looking at the reforms that have been announced on the conventional arms transfer side of things, I think it's a paradigm shift, right? Because it actually is stepping away from this idea that you were suggesting that everyone in the world will wait, everyone in the world will be patient for what the U.S. has to offer. Rather, it's a recognition that we are in a race for influence, and a race for achieving, establishing, and sustaining the kind of partnership that we're going to need to ensure that U.S. interests align as closely and effectively as possible with our allies and partners, so that that collaboration defines the global marketplace, the global security environment for the next 20 years.
Remy Nathan, Vice President for International Affairs at the Aerospace Industries Association of America. I'm kidding. It's Aerospace Industries Association. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.